back to the Tina Butty podcast with me, Erica.
And me, Dominic.
And today we are going to be talking about a fun subject, fun to think about anyway.
Yeah.
We put out on Instagram, well, actually, back up a little bit.
Back up.
Beep, 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 yeah. We've been watching Outlander. If you haven't been keeping up with our podcast...
You know we've been watching Outlander. Yeah. Even if you haven't been keeping up with our podcast.
Yeah. Or if
because you'd have seen it on Instagram.
Social media,
or Twitter or something.
We've been watching Outlander, and we are officially addicted. We've flown through all the first seasons, and we are all caught up with what is currently happening in the Stars program. Outlander is about a wartime nurse from the 40s, an English nurse, who travels back in time to 18th century Scotland.
Scotland!
Yeah. And that's kind of all we'll talk about that.
Yeah, we won't spoil it further
if you're interested, go check out the series. If you like period dramas, this will be.
Let's just say if you like historical drama,
like Poldark,
with this like historical fiction type thing, concerning real events. If you like romance novels, if you're a big romance novel head, this is the show for you.
Romance novel head, yeah.
Yeah, because that's pretty much how it was kind of written.
Yeah.
In a setting.
Mm-hmm. And then a little bit science fiction-y because
and
of the time travel.
Yeah, it's got science fiction and fantasy elements as well.
It got us talking about and thinking about, what time period would you travel back to if you could travel through time? And so that's what today's podcast is about. And we put it out on Instagram.
We're going to give you a shout out, everybody.
Yeah, so if you answered us on Instagram, then we'll shout you out in this episode. I want to just go through some of these answers that we got on Instagram because we got some really interesting answers.
Yeah.
Some people gave us reasons for
why they wanted to go back. Some people just said
the period. Yeah. And so I want to just talk about each of these answers and would that be some time that we too would like to go to and why or why not. Okay, so the first answer we got was the Wild West. And
the Wild Wild West.
And that was from Julie the Not So Flexible Yogi.
Julie the Not So Flexible Yogi there, everybody.
Yeah, so the Wild West.
The Wild West, I don't know. I mean, would I want to go back to the Wild West?
Now, we're thinking of the Wild West as what, 1800s?
I mean, 1800s. I mean, that's
Western America.
That was its golden age.
Yeah.
You know, because there's things in history, and historians like to, put a broad term on, eras, like the golden age of sail, the golden age of piracy, golden age, the Industrial Revolution era, the golden age of the Renaissance, all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So I think the Wild West, the golden age of the Wild West was around late 1700s to late 1800s. I think it was almost a century.
Yeah. There was a lot of migration westward throughout the entire...
after the Revolutionary War, and I think maybe it was late 1700s to mid 1800s, because after the Civil War, everybody wanted to get out of the eastern seaboard and just went west,
Yeah, I was going to say, I think...
Go west, young man, go west, because of gold rushes and everything.
Yes.
The California gold rush.
It was the gold rush. It was just land... Now, I'm into genealogy, so I've done a bit of research on this, and westward, nobody was living there. Well, the natives were living there, but let's not go there.
Yeah, let's not go there.
Nobody was living there.
It's a terrible period in history.
As far as white people. So what they were doing is they were giving away plots of land. If you would
willy-nilly.
If you would come over and, what is the homestead? They called it homesteading.
Pioneering.
Well, what you had to do was...
Frontiersman.
You had to go live on the land. You had to build a house, plant plants, if it was especially we're talking in New Mexico and places there was no sort of...
There was no sort of, arable farmland, there wasn't anything that European people would have
recognized.
Yeah, you know, if you were coming from France or Britain, or Ireland, this is kind of like, it was desert land. It was like, what's going to grow here? Nothing, you know?
Yeah.
Cactus. That's it.
Yeah.
You know?
So they wanted you to, you know, create a ranch. They wanted you to build a post office, you know.
Trading post, as they would have been known.
Yeah, create a market. They wanted you to build a town, basically. But you weren't making any money. You had to live on that land.
Yeah.
Like if you left and went back home, wherever say your family was living in Virginia or Georgia or somewhere, you would go out to New Mexico.
Yeah.
And probably your wife or, you know, some members of your family would stay back in Virginia.
Yeah.
And because somebody had to work and make money.
Yeah.
While you were over here just staking your claim on the land.
Staking your claim on your land. Yeah. And also the whole thing about that was they were giving that stuff away. I mean, if in the beginning it was like the British doing it, you know, just giving away plots of land and saying, okay, raise it and then we'll tax you, you know. And then I think it was then after the America declared independence, it was the American government doing that with people, just saying, giving them plots of land. But it was just kind of like, you go over there and fight the natives and clear them out.
Right.
For us.
Kind of create your own government, basically, or a police system, you know, sheriff system, whatever.
Yeah.
You know, and that's where the whole thing came from. There were no laws because there was no...
Very lawless, very.
There was no town. Basically, turn this into a town from scratch, you know. And this was going on into the very early 20th century, into the turn of the 20th century.
Yeah,
it was still going on.
It's still going on
far
to some...
west,
Far west, yes. I mean...
Because I have a family member, and this is a little bit of like a taboo sort of a thing from our family, where one of the men in our family at that time was sent to New Mexico. His wife stayed back home. She was, I think, doing people's laundry, like just to keep some money coming in so that they could live.
Yeah.
Because if they all went over there, well, you're not making any money. You're getting land and stuff, but you don't have the money to get the materials to buy the house or whatever, you know. So somebody had to stay working. So she stayed working. Well, while he was over there, he met a woman.
Yeah.
Yeah. He met a woman.
Pioneer woman.
And you know, that was a whole... And left the female member of my family and their kids and... Yeah, but I imagine
but that thing happened probably all the time.
Well, you're not living
and the
together.
woman probably met a man, you know, where she was living, you know, and it was just because the husband's away.
It was the Wild West.
The Wild West, very wild.
But would you want to go back there?
And it was wild.
But would you want to go back to that?
I don't think so. I that's not kind of my... I like watching it in movies, like westerns and stuff like that. But I don't think I'd like living in it, you know.
Yeah.
Or, you know, maybe visiting maybe would be cool, but I'd have to have an escape route, you know. I'd have to have, you know, to get out, get back to my own time or whatever, you know.
I mean, my grandpa was so into westerns that I feel like I've just growing up seen so many, and they're just terrible, shooting each other all the time and being attacked by Native Americans and... you know, you get injured or you get sick and there's you know, they don't have the medicines or whatever to heal you. It's just like, and it's dusty and hot. I don't know.
And everybody's drinking brown liquor, scotch or whiskey that's been like distilled, like moonshine, with a cork.
Can dancers. That would be a reason to stay in the visit the Wild West. Yes. Yeah. I think I'm with you. Nice place to visit, but I wouldn't want to live there.
I wouldn't want to live there.
The next answer we had came from Mallory Kalina.
Mallory!
And she listed several time periods that she would travel back to.
Ancient Egypt, ancient Rome, ancient Greece, and medieval Rome. So a lot of Rome in there.
A lot of good choices, too. I mean, the thing about time travel is you could, if you could travel through time, you could theoretically travel to any period, right?
You could travel to any period,
you could do a Doctor Who.
Yeah.
And, like, just go to whatever period you wanted to visit, and then, like,
whatever you wanted to whatever you fancied, yeah. Wherever you were needed.
But, the ancient civilizations, yeah. I mean, definitely that would be interesting, just because they don't really know with 100% certainty what went on, do they?
No. That's because, I mean, the records and stuff are very sketchy from that time.
Right, yeah.
And it's just like word of mouth, and legends and myths get incorporated into, oh, this is actually what happened.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when it was just like, oh no, that was someone's narrative that, you know.
Yeah.
And what actually happened was this. And, you know, it's like, yeah, I mean, there's no, like, written record, you know, from an unbiased perspective.
Yeah, ancient Egypt, ancient Rome, ancient Greece, that would...
Those would be cool to see,
Those would be very, very cool,
Again, for me, though, not a place I'd like to live.
Well, yeah.
You know?
Yeah. You wouldn't want to go back and just stay there.
I wouldn't want to go back and stay there, yeah. I mean, I'm very much...
But then again, you know, by all accounts, they were pretty far advanced.
Well, Rome, yeah. Rome and Greece, yeah.
Medicinally, and just they had plumbing, they had all kinds of stuff, even in the ancient...
If it wasn't for Romans, we'd be no better than savages, dear boy.
You know, the facilities and things that they had, it kind of makes you wonder what happened. What really happened?
What really happened there?
What happened to those civilizations that we sort of went...
Well,
they were like advancing really rapidly for a while.
They were advancing, yeah, and as was ambition. And then with ambition comes, you know...
Yeah. Do you ever fear that that's kind of where we are again?
Well, I think maybe, but I don't know. It's kind of at a balance right now. The world, you know. It's just kind of like at a balance, I think. It's just like, there could be that kind of like thing happen again, but I don't think it'll happen for a great number of years, maybe a couple of centuries.
Yeah. Where you put
ambition above everything else,
yeah.
You know, just
and it destroys you in a way.
Because that's what happened with ancient Rome. Everybody was wanting to get power, you know, it's like the last days of Rome. They always talk about that. Oh, it's the last days of Rome. Everybody was getting drunk and partying and everything, you know, and going wild. Yeah. And then it was just like, boom, it was gone, you know.
The other period that she mentions is medieval Rome. I don't really know if I know a lot about medieval Rome. Medieval times, period.
Yeah.
Medieval Britain.
Well, that's
a period that's always like...
The thing is, after the Roman Empire, after ancient Rome, came medieval Rome, yeah, and it was like the Pope and, you know, Christianity and everything emerged. And so, you know, they were given over to, like, the Pope had so much power in medieval, and all up until the 1700s, you know, he had that much power, you know, he could crown kings and...
We just started watching the Borgias.
Yeah, the Borgias, yeah.
We've literally only seen the first episode.
And, you know, do all this kind of stuff. He had so much influence all over Europe, you know, in the monarchies.
He was like the king of kings,
The king of kings, yeah. That's exactly what it was, you know. And that kind of started falling apart when Henry VIII cast him off and decided, oh, we don't need you after all.
Yeah. A king is as close to God as it needs to be.
Yes, yeah. So his influence diminished a little bit there, you know.
Yeah. I think, I mean, I don't know a whole lot about the period. Did Henry VIII casting the Catholic Church away, did that influence other monarchs around Europe?
I'm not sure. I'm assuming it did, though.
To do the same, yeah.
Because they all lived in fear of the Pope, because the Pope says, you know, if you don't do what I say, God is gonna get you. You know, it was that kind of thing, you know, and they were like, oh, he actually has the ear of God. And
right.
And so when Henry VIII says, actually, I have the ear of God. I'm a king. Mm-hmm. My will is God's will. Yeah. So goodbye, Thomas Cromwell. Go tell the Pope, I don't care what he thinks about my divorce. And then that happened, and, you know, it was like a big ructions and everything, and Cromwell was killed. Mm-hmm. Or I think he was actually just sent back to Rome. I'm not sure. Maybe he was killed. But then, of course, all the other monarchies around Europe were like, oh, nothing really happened to Henry VIII. Straight away.
Mm-hmm.
God didn't smite him down.
He wasn't struck down, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously he died later on, but it was just like, there was still enough fear there, that the Pope could keep going. But yeah, it did influence it at the end of the day, and then that was the beginning. I think that was largely the beginning of the end for the Pope's, like, influence over all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, the Pope's reign.
The Pope's reign.
Okay.
Of course, there still is a Pope.
Yeah.
But he doesn't make kings anymore.
Yeah, but, I mean, think about that. There's still a Pope, and how many other, like...
Well, he's
got
the
many
Vatican,
kings do we know of? You know what I mean? Like, really, it's just the British... It's just the British royal family that the world is very familiar with. There are still royal families that exist elsewhere in the world.
Well, in Europe, especially, yeah.
But the British royal family is the only one that pretty much
because the French had a couple of revolutions. The Russians, the Tsar, which is what they call their king. The Tsar was overthrown. Mm-hmm. It was kind of like all these kings were getting overthrown and by the people.
Yeah,
the will of the people. So yeah.
Okay, switching gears. This one is the most different, I think, answer that we've we've had, and it made me laugh, and not to make fun of the answer, but it just made me laugh because it made me feel old, I guess. Really, and the answer comes from Diana.Nuno.
Diana,
and she says that she would like to travel back to the 90s because she loves the fashion, the music, and electronics weren't as big, so people talked to each other.
Traveling back to the 90s. I mean, I lived through the 90s,
I can remember the 90s
I can
like
remember
it was
them,
yesterday.
Yeah. I mean, that's showing how old
we are.
Yeah. I mean, I just, I don't know if I'd want to go back in the 90s. I'd only go back because it's like, I have a bit of nostalgia.
Yeah,
for them,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like, I have a bit of a nostalgia for the 90s. But really, when I think about it, nothing really was that different in the 90s than it is now, except for, like, the advancement of technology and
even the fashion
internet.
Is back, really.
Even the fashion is back, it's just like you'll just have technology. If it was going back to the 90s, you know what was coming, yeah. But really, I don't think I'd want to go back there. Because I can remember it.
Yeah, I can remember it very vividly.
And I only want to go back to places that I can't remember, from my time. I didn't live through,
Yeah. I mean, I was, like, coming of age in the 90s, you know what I mean? Like, I was a teenager, and I was becoming like an older teenager, like a grown-up, I guess, toward the end of the 90s. And so I do have fond memories of life in the 90s.
Yeah.
So for that reason, maybe I would like to go back. I see her point.
Yeah.
Like, social media didn't exist.
That was like the last days of innocence in the world, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
Before the internet bubble exploded and everybody got the internet.
Rooms.
There were chat rooms. Yeah, but that was like...
There was instant messaging. But yeah, it wasn't...
So really, you'd say the 80s, really, because it wasn't a large thing like it is today, and nobody can live without the internet in the Western world today.
Yeah.
It's that kind of thing. If the internet suddenly went down, like, if we were banned from the internet, can you imagine the uproar?
Oh, yeah.
I think some people would kill themselves. I mean, I'm not being...
Oh, my God.
Not trying to make this morbid or anything, but I think some people would be that affected by it. They wouldn't be able to... Because they wouldn't be able to get online. They wouldn't be able to... And it's like, we've got so used to, like, information at our fingertips and, what's so-and-so doing and talking to people and whatever, that it would just be such a shock for people, that people who are like, oh, no, I can't live with it. I can't just go to watching TV. I can't go to reading a book. I can't go to, like, living as if the internet doesn't exist, And that's probably going to be the hardest thing for people who want to go back in time to pre-internet days.
Yeah.
Because it's like the giving up of that information at your fingertips.
Well, yeah, because you know what? you would want to tweet or Instagram about this, wouldn't you?
Just chilling in 1965, Oh, it's so cool here.
Hashtag
the old
time
money.
travel.
Yeah. just chilling in 1995 here, What was happening in 1995?
Take a selfie. What was happening?
I can't remember. 1995, what happened? Nothing. I mean, it was the 90s, it was just, people were just living their lives,
It was all about boy bands and pop music.
Oh, yeah. Take that, just split up, 1995, whenever it was.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Okay, the next one, moving on, comes from Twist Little Girl. Again, these all come from Instagram. And
Twist Little Girl.
And she says the late 50s and 60s.
Yeah, that's probably close to my answer.
Yeah.
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 I always think of how, just going into my, what I think about time travel. I always think about how old I am and which time period would I be still relevant in? Would I be relevant in? I'm I'm in my 30s now.
Regarding
and it's just like,
the age.
Teenagers like, I want to go back to the 50s and 60s. But as like a 40-year-old, they're just going to look at you as like an old man or an old woman, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And that's...
40-year-olds were old, weren't they?
They were very old people, And it's just kind of like, you're not hip, man, or whatever, you're not young. So I always think about that, when would be the best time for me to, like, live my best life? Live my best time traveling life, But I suppose, you're young enough. And I mean, you look young enough compared to someone in medieval times who was like in their 30s, who probably looked like they were in their 80s because they'd been working hard and no medicine and, and no hygiene and, proper hygiene and everything. So, yeah. I mean, the 50s and 60s, though.
Yeah.
That's kind of the golden age of rock and roll. And,
Yeah. I mean, if you could go back and see any of those bands or...
For the music, definitely.
Yeah, for the music, definitely.
I mean, socially...
No.
I know. I mean...
People who are into the music, this is the thing, people who are into the music from that time period, that's all they think about. Or they like the fashion, they like
and the music.
Peace and love aspects,
That was late 60s, early 70s.
But it's like, going back realistically, women...
You're going to have to live in that time period.
Yeah, women were treated horrendously at that time.
It was still a horrendous time for women at that time.
Anybody who was not white was treated horrendously at that time. It's like there were huge social injustices and inequalities. It's like, realistically, I would not want to go back and live in those periods, Go visit, go see some concerts, and then come home. Yeah,
there was a lot of a lot of what we see today. It's interesting to like watch that back in time for dinner and back in time and stuff like that, because the 60s is really when, well, in Britain anyway, is when advancements in food technology started coming through.
Yeah,
like you could get a food processor or whatever, like the basic stuff, and also food itself, like processed food was coming in, so all this like sugary stuff and that was like starting to come in, and so it's stuff that we recognize today. It's a time that is, it's probably one of the reasons why I'd go back to the 60s, which would be my thing, because it's recognizable, even though, and it's not totally alien. So
yeah. I mean, yeah, it's definitely for the music. For the music, I would like to go back.
The music, most definitely, you know. And, there was just a lot, you know what's coming. So it's just like, you could be like a Claire Fraser and go back and just, find someone and hook up and be all cool and, just like...
Yeah.
And just be all
to find the people to hang out with, that you're going to get to meet all these other people.
Where they're going to be, roughly, if you've done your research before, if you had pre-knowledge of you were going to be able to time travel.
Yeah.
You do all the research you could and like, okay, this is the time period I want to go back to and I'll find out where they are. And
Yeah, I'd be interested to know where in the 50s or 60s she'd like to go.
I'm going to say 1959, 1960.
Britain or America?
It's going to be America, I think.
Because I think
I don't know. You have to tell us, Twist Little Girl.
Because I think I'd rather be in Britain in the 60s
in the
than
60s
in America.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
with the old money. I can just see you now with the shillings and stuff.
Oh no!
I'm going like I don't know how to do these because you were very nervous with the £20 notes, as I remember, when you came to Britain in 2007.
Oh my god!
So I can only imagine what you're like with
the
pounds,
change,
shillings, and
you guys. The change.
The change. And you just like
there's a 1 pence and there's a 2 pence. No one knows why.
There was a 1 pence and a 2 pence, and there was like half halfpennies and. Oh god, shillings.
Well, I mean now.
Yeah.
I mean, now there's a 1 pence and a 2 pence.
But yeah, I can just imagine you back then too.
Unchained Melody. Unchained Melody 2 says
She's
be
the
cool.
second Unchained Melody.
Might be cool to go back to a time with my ancestors to see it through their eyes. I think I agree with that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Go back through your own family line. That would be funny. Yeah. That would be really funny. Because I always think about going back to when my mother was like a teenager and going back to when my grandmother was a teenager and my great-grandmother and seeing what's going on with them.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of like, which is essentially what they're kind of doing in Outlander. Yeah. With some of them,
Yeah. Yeah, no, I like that answer a lot.
It's genealogy.
Yeah.
It's ancestral findings.
That goes along with my
genealogy bank.
My interest in genealogy and ancestry. Yeah. Yeah, I do like that answer because, like I said, it would just be interesting.
Yeah.
You kind of feel when you're researching your family tree and you're finding old documents and things like that, you kind of feel like you're putting a story together in your head anyway.
Yeah.
So I would like to go back and see if what I'm sort of thinking was the case is true.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or if I'm way off, just whatever, Yeah. I really like that. I think maybe that might be closer to my answer.
Okay.
Like just whatever, different periods throughout my family's history and just see what was going on with them, Shanty the Roadrunner says back to America, in quotation marks, back when the natives roamed free.
So the North American continent,
yeah.
Before it was the United States.
Yeah, so before any settlers from anywhere landed here, maybe?
That medieval times then.
That would be really cool too, actually. Don't you think?
Yeah, medieval, so it would be like the 1400s, I think, because it was like the 1600s when first pilgrims came over here.
Yeah.
The Mayflower and all that. Columbus.
Well, 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, but, I mean, he didn't land in the United States.
No, he didn't. He landed in the Caribbean, didn't he? Somewhere.
Yeah. No, I really like that answer, too. It would be just so interesting. Again, because like you were talking about with the ancient civilizations, there are no real definitive records about what went on or,
Not at all, no.
Yeah, so that would be a really, really interesting time period, definitely. Again, none of these I would want to stay. I wouldn't want to stay in any of these.
You wouldn't want to stay and live out your life with the Mohawk or the Iroquois.
Yeah. The Cherokee.
The
Mohawk are the Iroquois.
Mohawk are the Iroquois. That was just a tribe of the Iroquois.
Yeah.
But you see, there's no records,
See, Cy Aldry UK.
Cy Aldry
says the 1940s.
1940s. Since he's from Britain, I'm imagining he'd want to go back to 1940s Britain.
I mean, from an interesting point of view, yeah.
I mean, after having watched Goodnight Sweetheart.
But what a scary
It was a scary for Britain. Yeah, I mean, it's probably better to go back to 1940s America.
Yeah.
Than 1940s Britain, because, I mean, especially if you wanted to go back to, like, London or any of the ports or anything like that during, like, from the period 1940 to 1943, 44, you know?
Yeah.
for those 4 years, it was very heavily bombed.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of like air raids and stuff. You know, again, it's a nice place to visit, but you wouldn't want to live there.
Scary.
Scary.
Just the rationing and everything.
You're rationing, you're going to be
terrible.
hungry. You know, the only thing you can get off ration was fish and chips, and that was every now and then because the U-boats were sinking the ships that were bringing in potatoes.
You're always getting news of
fish.
Friends or family members who have been
killed,
injured or killed in the war. Yeah, I mean,
it was a crazy time. You know, and with this virus that's going on now.
Mm-hmm.
In Britain, everybody's like, oh, yes, this is like wartime Britain. We haven't seen this since the Second World War, and this is the measures that we're taking are very much like that. You know, the government are coming out with that.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, in a way, but there's no enemy, you know, really. I mean, unless you count the virus as the enemy. But really, it's no defined set of parameters, you know, really.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an interesting period to watch a movie or a television show set in. I mean, it would be interesting to go back and experience it firsthand.
Yeah.
It would be.
If you had an escape route.
Yeah, I
need an escape route.
I definitely want to leave when I wanted to leave.
I couldn't come in and say, you go through a portal or whatever it will be, and it closes for like 2 days or a week or whatever, you know, and my little week's holiday in 1945, you know.
Yeah. Maverick454 says the 1970s.
Groovy, man. Yeah, I mean, that's like the 60s, you know, it's like the 70s were kind of like this, oh, yeah, man. It's, yeah.
I think that, you know, as opposed to the 50s or 60s, things...
A lot of processed food.
Things were improving slightly in the 70s for people of color, for women, you know.
High collars. A lot of like big collars and fish. And kipper ties.
Disco.
And polyester.
No, I'm out.
A lot of polyester and platform shoes.
Disco.
And flares.
Oh, no, I can't.
And of course, Roger Moore was James Bond, so that's the only reason I go back.
I'm out. No, I was considering it, but I'm out. Disco and the horrible, like, polyester, like, Brady Bunch kind of clothes. No. I can't do it. I cannot do it. Sorry. Rock and roll was still good, though, in the 70s.
Rock and roll was good.
Yeah, so you still had some good music, if you don't count disco. Spring Breeze to You says that she would go back to September of 2019, Atlanta, Georgia, screaming that the Wuhan China virus is coming.
Well,
so basically,
the CDC was saying it. Yeah.
Basically, she would want to go back and
before the virus,
and just warn everybody that it was coming. So yeah, I mean, I think we'd all probably like to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Like to know ahead of time that this was going to happen, and maybe you could do something to prevent it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've pretty much covered everything. One period, well, actually two, I'll say. Obviously, if you've listened to these podcasts before, you know that I'm obsessed with Leonardo da Vinci. So one period I would like to go back to would be the Renaissance.
Yeah.
That would be awesome.
Mm-hmm.
If I could go and meet him or be anywhere around him, just like get to know him. And another period that I have always found really interesting is like the Roaring 20s in Europe. Because you had a lot of writers and musicians and painters all kind of like very midnight in Paris.
Yes.
You know, they were all commingling, and it was sort of like the swinging 60s in Britain, only set
it was a golden age of Art Deco.
Yeah. In the 20s in Europe. You know, that would be a cool time. But again, I mean, I wouldn't want to remain in any of these.
We'd have to do another episode on this, like specific moments in history you'd go back to, and would you change them if you could?
Oh god.
So that'll be
that's another podcast.
That's another pack.
Look for that one coming.
Episode, yeah.
Anyway, we hope you're all doing well at home, or if you're going to work, we hope you're staying safe and washing your hands and finding things to keep yourself sane during this time. And yeah, I mean, that's basically all we can hope for, is that everybody's doing as well as can be. And
during this quarantined time.
Yeah, it's a crazy time, but we all do what we have to do. So
yeah,
just stay safe, stay positive, and thank you as always for listening. We appreciate your time and we value it so greatly. And we'll talk to you guys next time.
We'll talk to you next time, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.